Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, staring at the endless field of stars through the main view screen of the starship, Liberty Bell. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from the mirror. Control panels. It had been 3 weeks since they last saw another human ship, and the crew was getting restless. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors," called out Lisa Grant from her position at the communications station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she tried to clean up the signal. "It's very faint, but it's definitely artificial." Jake turned his chair toward her. "What kind of signal?" Lisa frowned at her screen. "That's the weird part, sir. It sounds like ... music." The other bridge officers looked up from their stations. Chief Science Officer Ryan Kelly raised an eyebrow. "Music? Out here in the middle of nowhere?" Jake stood up and walked over to Lisa's station. "Let me hear it." Lisa adjusted some controls, and suddenly the bridge filled with a familiar tune. The melody was scratchy and broken up by static, but everyone recognized it immediately. Someone was playing Jingle Bells somewhere out in the darkness of space. "That's impossible," whispered Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's medical officer who happened to be on the bridge for her routine check-in. "We're hundreds of light years from Earth. There shouldn't be anyone out here." Jake listened to the tune for a full minute before speaking. "Where's it coming from?" Lisa worked her controls again. "I'm trying to trace the source now, Captain. It's very weak, like it's traveling a long distance." She paused, studying her readings. "Got it. The signal is coming from a star system about 2 days away at maximum warp. The system shows 3 planets, but our long-range scans don't show any signs of advanced civilization." Ryan Kelly moved to his science station and began running his own scans. "Captain, according to our star charts, that system has never been explored by human ships. There's no record of any colonies or outposts in that area." Jake rubbed his chin, thinking. The Liberty Bell was on a routine patrol mission along the outer edge of human space. Their job was to watch for alien threats and check on the scattered mining stations and research outposts that dotted this region. But this was something completely different. Could it be a trap? Asked Security Chief Nicole Adams, who had just arrived on the bridge after hearing about the strange signal. "Maybe some alien species learned one of our songs and is using it to lure us in." Dr. Foster shook her head. "That seems unlikely. Jingle Bells isn't exactly a song we'd include in our first contact protocols. It's just a simple children's Christmas song." The music continued to play softly in the background as the crew debated. Jake found himself tapping his foot to the rhythm without realizing it. The song brought back memories of Christmas mornings on Earth, of snow and presents and family gatherings. It seemed impossible that something so innocent and familiar could be coming from the depths of unexplored space. "Captain," Lisa said suddenly, "the signal just got stronger for a moment. I think whoever is sending this is trying to boost the transmission somehow." Jake made his decision. "Set course for that star system. Maximum warp." "Sir, are you sure that's wise?" Ryan asked. "We don't know what we're flying into. It could be dangerous." Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, experienced officers who had served with him for years. They trusted his judgment, but they also weren't afraid to question his orders when they thought it was necessary. That's what made them a good crew. "Think about it," Jake said. "Someone out there knows that song. That means they're either human or they've had contact with humans. Either way, we need to investigate. If there are humans in trouble out there, it's our duty to help them." Navigator Beth Williams spoke up from her station. "Course laid in, Captain. At maximum warp, we'll reach the system in 47 hours. "Make it so," Jake ordered, settling back into his command chair. "And Lisa, keep monitoring that signal. I want to know if anything changes." As the Liberty Bell jumped to warp speed, the stars outside stretched into lines of light. The music continued to play, sometimes fading to almost nothing, sometimes coming through clearly enough that they could make out individual notes. It was definitely being played on some kind of instrument, not just a recording. Someone somewhere was actually performing Jingle Bells. Dr. Foster remained on the bridge, longer than usual, listening to the music with a thoughtful expression. You know, Captain, there's something about this that reminds me of children playing. The rhythm isn't perfect, like you'd expect from adult musicians. It has that earnest, slightly offbeat quality that kids have when they're learning a song. Jake nodded. He had noticed the same thing. That makes it even more important that we investigate. If there are children involved, they might need our help. Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the direction of that signal. Nothing dangerous, but it's like someone is using a lot of power to boost a very weak transmitter. Keep monitoring it, Carlos, Jake replied. Let me know if anything changes. The hours passed slowly as the Liberty Bell raced through space toward the source of the mysterious music. The crew took turns listening to the signal, trying to figure out what kind of instruments were being used and how many people might be playing. Sometimes the music would stop for several minutes, then start up again with slight variations in the melody. Jake found himself thinking about Christmas. It was still months away, but hearing Jingle Bells in the middle of space made him homesick for Earth. He wondered if whoever was playing the song felt the same way. Were they trying to remember home? Were they celebrating something? Or were they simply trying to send a message to anyone who might be listening? As they entered the final hours of their journey, Jake called a meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in the conference room adjacent to the bridge, the music still playing softly in the background. Whatever we find out there, Jake told them, we go in careful but ready to help. If there are humans in need of rescue, we'll do everything we can. If it's something else, we stay alert and ready for anything. Questions? Nicole Adams raised her hand. What if it really is a trap, Captain? What if we're flying into an ambush? Jake smiled grimly. Then we'll show them what happens when someone uses a Christmas song to try to hurt humans. But somehow, I don't think that's what this is about. The music played on, carrying its message across the vast emptiness of space, drawing the Liberty Bell and her crew toward whatever awaited them in the unknown star system ahead. The Liberty Bell dropped out of warp at the edge of the star system. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the main screen as the ship's sensors swept the 3 planets orbiting the yellow star. The music signal was much stronger. Now, coming from the second planet, a world that looked green and blue like Earth. I'm reading an atmosphere that can support human life, reported Ryan Kelly from the science station. Oxygen levels are good. Gravity is about 90% of Earth normal. Temperature readings show it's winter on the continent where the signal is coming from. Lisa Grant looked up from her communications panel. Captain, I'm picking up more than just the music now. There are other signals, very faint. They look like old-style radio transmissions, the kind we used 50 years ago. Jake felt his heart beat faster. Any voices? I think so, but they're too weak to make out clearly. Wait. Lisa adjusted her controls, and suddenly a scratchy voice filled the bridge. This is Mayor Collins of New Haven Colony. Day 18,212 since the crash. We are still alive. We are still human. If anyone can hear this, please respond. The bridge went silent. Jake stared at the screen, processing what they had just heard. A human colony crashed and stranded for almost 50 years. The math was simple but shocking. 50 years, whispered Dr. Foster. They've been alone out there for 50 years. Jake made his decision quickly. Take us into orbit around that planet. Lisa, try to respond to their signal. Let them know we're here. As the Liberty Bell moved closer to the planet, more details became clear. The second continent showed signs of a small settlement near what looked like the wreckage of an old colony ship. There were buildings, farms, and what appeared to be some kind of communication array made from salvaged parts. Lisa worked her controls frantically. I'm trying to reach them, Captain, but their equipment is so old and damaged that I can't get through on normal frequencies. Wait, I think I can boost our signal through their music transmission somehow. The Jingle Bells melody continued to play, and now they could hear it was coming from what sounded like handmade instruments. There was a small bell, something that might have been a wooden flute, and voices singing along. Children's voices. There are kids down there, said Dr. Foster softly. Children who were born on that planet and have never seen Earth. Jake nodded grimly. Lisa, keep trying to reach them. Beth, find us a safe place to land near their settlement. Nicole, I want a security team ready, but keep weapons on stun. These people have been through enough. It took 2 hours of careful maneuvering before Lisa finally managed to establish contact. The voice that came through the speakers was older now, tired but excited. This is Mayor Peter Collins of New Haven Colony. Are you really there? Are you really human? We've been sending signals for so long. Jake took the communication device from Lisa. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the starship Liberty Bell. We heard your music and came to investigate. We're human, and we're here to help. There was a long pause, then the sound of crying and cheering in the background. Captain Morrison, this is the best Christmas present we could have asked for. We have 87 people here, including 15 children. We've been waiting so long for someone to find us. We're coming down to meet you, Jake said. Prepare a landing zone for our shuttle. An hour later, Jake and his away team stood on the surface of the planet, breathing air that smelled of pine trees and snow. The settlement was small but well built, with wooden houses and stone buildings that looked like they had been constructed with great care over many years. Gardens and fields surrounded the village, and smoke rose from chimneys in the crisp winter air. The colonists who came to meet them were wearing simple clothes made from local materials. Their faces showed the marks of hard work and difficult years, but their eyes were bright with hope and joy. An elderly man with gray hair and a thick beard stepped forward. I'm Peter Collins, he said, extending his hand to Jake. Welcome to New Haven. We never gave up hope that someone would come. Jake shook his hand firmly. We're glad we found you. Tell me what happened. As they walked toward the main building, Peter explained their story. We were part of the third wave of colony ships leaving Earth 50 years ago. Our ship, the New Horizon, had engine problems and crashed here. We lost 32 people in the crash, including most of our technical specialists. The rest of us have been surviving ever since. They entered a large wooden hall where the rest of the colonists were waiting. Jake saw men and women of all ages, from elderly people who must have been on the original ship to young adults who had been born on this world. But what caught his attention most were the children. 2 small figures stood near, a makeshift stage where several homemade instruments were arranged. A boy who looked about 8 years old held a small bell made from salvaged metal. Beside him, a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 clutched a wooden flute. Both children stared at Jake and his team with wide, curious eyes. These are Leo and Karolina Martinez, said Peter, gesturing to the children. They're our youngest musicians. They've been practicing Jingle Bells for our winter celebration. Leo there figured out how to connect his bell to our old transmitter to make the mix well. Signal stronger. Jake knelt down to the children's level. So you're the ones who helped us find you. That was very smart thinking. Leo smiled shyly. We wanted to make sure Santa could find us if he was looking. Mama said he might not know where we are since we're not on Earth. Jake felt a lump in his throat. Well, we're not Santa, but we did follow your music to find you. Karolina stepped forward and held up her flute. Would you like to hear our song? We've been practicing really hard. Before Jake could answer, the children began to play. Leo rang his bell in steady rhythm while Karolina played the melody on her wooden flute. Other children joined in, singing the words to Jingle Bells in clear, sweet voices. The adults smiled and hummed along, and Jake realized that this simple song had become something special to these people. It was a connection to the Earth they had lost, a reminder of the home they still carried in their hearts. When the song ended, The hall was quiet except for the sound of people wiping away tears. Jake stood up and faced the gathered colonists. "Where?" "Going to get you home," he said. "All of you. It might take some time to arrange transport for everyone, but nobody gets left behind." Peter Collins stepped forward. "Captain, there's something else you need to know. We've survived here for 50 years, but it hasn't been easy. This planet isn't as safe as it looks. There are others who come here sometimes, others who aren't human." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What kind of others?" "Ships," said an elderly woman named Helen Carter, who Jake noticed carried herself like a former soldier. "Big ships that patrol this sector. They've never landed, but they've scanned us several times over the years. We've learned to hide when they come. That's why we built most of our settlement underground," Peter added. "And why we only send signals when we think it's safe. Your arrival might have been noticed." Jake looked at his away team, seeing the same concern in their eyes that he felt. They had found the colonists, but they might have also led danger right to them. "How long do we usually have between visits from these ships?" he asked. Helen checked. A handmade calendar on the wall. Based on their pattern, the next patrol should be in about 3 weeks. But patterns can change. Jake nodded grimly. "Then we need to work fast. We'll contact Starfleet Command and get a rescue fleet out here as soon as possible." As the colonists began to disperse, preparing for what might be their last weeks on the world that had been their home for so long, Leo tugged on Jake's uniform. "Captain, will we be able to celebrate Christmas on Earth this year?" Jake smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you do, son. I promise." Jake Morrison spent the next 2 days learning everything he could about the New Haven colony. The colonists showed him their underground city, a maze of tunnels and rooms carved into the hillside behind their surface buildings. It was impressive. Work for people who had started with nothing but salvaged materials from their crashed ship. "We began digging the first winter," explained Helen Carter as she led Jake through the main tunnel. "We learned quickly that this planet gets very cold, and we needed shelter. But after the first alien patrol found us, we realized we needed to hide as well as survive." The underground complex was larger than Jake had imagined. There were living quarters for all 87 colonists, workshops where they made tools and furniture, a medical bay run by their own doctor, and even a school where the children learned reading, writing, and mathematics. Everything was lit by clever mirrors that brought sunlight down from the surface during the day. "This is amazing," said Dr. Foster, who was examining their medical facilities. "You've built a complete civilization down here with almost no technology." Helen smiled proudly. "Humans are good at adapting. We had to be." In the main workshop, Jake met Carlos Rodriguez, the chief engineer who was studying the colonists' communication equipment with fascination. The array was a mixture of salvaged ship parts, handmade components, and clever engineering that had kept it working for decades. "Captain, you need to see this," Carlos said, pointing to a small device connected to the transmitter. "This is how." Young Leo boosted the signal. He figured out that his bell creates a resonance frequency that amplifies their radio waves. A 8-year-old boy invented a signal booster using physics he doesn't even know he understands. Jake shook his head in amazement. Humans always find a way. But their admiration was interrupted by an urgent call from the Liberty Bell. "Lisa." Grant's voice crackled through Jake's communicator. "Captain, you need to get back up here right away. We're detecting multiple ships approaching the system." Jake felt his stomach drop. "How many ships?" "At least 6, possibly more. They're still too far away for detailed scans, but they're definitely not human design. And Captain, they're moving fast." Jake turned to Helen Carter. "How much time do we usually have once you detect the patrol ships?" Helen's face went pale. "Usually about 12 hours from first detection to when they enter orbit." "But Captain, you said 6 ships." "We've never seen more than 2 at a time." Jake grabbed his communicator. "Lisa, how long until they reach the planet?" "Based on their current speed, about 10 hours, Captain." The news spread quickly through the colony. Jake watched as the colonists moved with practiced efficiency, gathering their most important belongings and preparing to move deeper underground. These people had been through this drill many times before, but he could see the fear in their faces. This time was different. "Captain," said Peter Collins, approaching with Leo and Karolina close behind him. "The children are scared. They don't understand why the bad ships are coming early." Jake knelt down to talk to the children. Leo clutched his precious bell while Karolina held her wooden flute. Both looked up at him with trusting eyes that made his heart ache. "Are the bad aliens going to hurt us?" Leo asked in a small voice. "Not if I can help it," Jake promised. "But I need you and your sister to be very brave and do exactly what the grown-ups tell you, okay?" Karolina nodded seriously. "Will we still be able to play our Christmas song?" "I hope so, sweetheart." "I really hope so." Back on the Liberty Bell, Jake called an emergency meeting of his senior officers. The alien ships were now close enough for detailed scans, and the news was not good. "They're hegemony vessels," reported Ryan Kelly, his face grim. "2 heavy cruisers, 3 destroyers, and what looks like a troop transport. This isn't a patrol, Captain. This is an invasion force." Jake had heard of the hegemony, a militant alliance of alien species that had been expanding aggressively through this sector of space. They were known for their hatred of human expansion and their policy of destroying any human settlements they found. "Why now?" asked Dr. Foster. The colonists said they'd been hiding successfully for years. Scout Commander Tony Brooks, who had been monitoring sensor readings, looked up from his station. "Captain, I think it might be our fault. When we responded to the colonist signal, we used our main communications array. The hegemony might have detected our transmission and traced it back here." The weight of that possibility hit Jake like a punch to the gut. They had come to rescue the colonists, but they might have doomed them instead. "Options," Jake said curtly. Nicole Adams spoke first. "We could evacuate immediately. The Liberty Bell can carry maybe 30 people if we pack them in tight. We have to leave the rest behind." "Not acceptable," Jake said immediately. "We could run," suggested Navigator Beth Williams. "Jump to warp and come back with reinforcements." Ryan Kelly shook his head. "By the time we could get back with help, it will be too late. The hegemony doesn't leave survivors." Jake stared at the tactical display showing the approaching alien ships. 6 vessels against 1. The Liberty Bell was a good ship with a skilled crew, but those weren't good odds. "There is another option," said a voice from the doorway. Helen Carter had come up from the planet with some of the other colonists. "We fight." Jake turned to face her. "Helen, I appreciate the sentiment, but your people aren't soldiers." Helen's eyes flashed with old fire. "No, Captain, but I am. I was a sergeant in the Colonial Marines before I joined the colony mission. And I'm not the only one down there with military experience. We spent 50 years learning every inch of this planet, every cave and tunnel. We know how to hide, how to survive, and how to fight dirty when we have to." Peter Collins stepped forward beside her. "Captain, this is our home now. These children were born here. We're not going to run away and leave everything we've built." Jake looked around the room at his officers and the colonists. He could see the determination in their faces, the willingness to stand and fight against impossible odds. It was exactly the kind of stubborn human courage that had carried their species to the stars. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. Helen smiled grimly. "We make them think this planet is more trouble than it's worth." "You said there are 6 ships? Good. Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." Over the next several hours, they worked out a desperate plan. The colonists would retreat to their underground city, taking the children and elderly to the deepest, safest areas. The able-bodied adults would help defend strategic positions, using weapons and supplies from the Liberty Bell. Meanwhile, Jake's crew would use the ship's superior firepower to try to even the odds. As they prepared for battle, young Leo approached Jake in the colony's main hall. The boy held up his bell, the same one that had helped send the signal that brought rescue. "Captain Jake, will you take care of my bell? I don't want it to get broken in the fight." Jake accepted the small metal instrument, feeling its weight in his hands. It was rough and simple, made from salvaged materials, but it had been crafted with love and had served its purpose perfectly. "I'll keep it safe, Leo, and when this is over, you can play Jingle Bells for the whole galaxy to hear." As the alien ships entered the outer edge of the star system, Jake stood on the bridge of the Liberty Bell, Leo's bell tucked safely in his pocket. Around the planet below, humans prepared to make their stand. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But they had something the hegemony didn't understand. They were fighting for their home, their families, and their future. The battle for New Haven was about to begin. The hegemony ships arrived at dawn, their dark shapes blocking out the morning sun as they took positions in orbit around the planet. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Liberty Bell as the alien vessels spread out in attack formation. Each ship was twice the size of his own vessel, and their weapons were already charging. "Captain, they're scanning the surface," reported Lisa Grant from her communication station. "They found the colony." Jake touched the small bell in his pocket, Leo's precious instrument that had started this whole adventure. Down on the planet, the colonists were hidden in their underground city, waiting for the battle to begin. The children were in the deepest tunnels, as far from danger as possible. But Jake knew that nowhere would be truly safe if the hegemony decided to destroy the planet. "Incoming transmission from the lead ship," Lisa announced. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the alien vessel. The hegemony commander was a tall, insect-like creature with 4 arms and black eyes that showed no emotion. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "Human vessel, you are in violation of hegemony space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Morrison of the Liberty Bell. This planet is home to human colonists who have lived here peacefully for 50 years. They pose no threat to anyone." The alien commander made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Humans are a disease that spreads across the galaxy. We will cure this infection as we have cured others. You have 1 minute to surrender." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear on their faces. They all knew this was probably a one-way fight. "Captain," said Nicole Adams quietly, "we could still run. Jump to warp and at least save ourselves." Jake shook his head. "Not without those people down there. They've been waiting 50 years for rescue. I'm not going to abandon them now." Down on the planet, Helen Carter gathered the colonist defenders in the main underground chamber. She had 23 adults ready to fight, armed with weapons from the Liberty Bell and whatever tools they could turn into weapons. It wasn't much against an invasion force, but it would have to do. "Listen up," Helen said, her military training taking over. "We're not trying to win a war here. We just need to make these aliens think twice about staying. Hit and run, use the tunnels, make every shot count. The captain up there is going to do his best to protect us, but we need to protect ourselves too." Peter Collins, who was too old to fight but too stubborn to hide with the children, stepped forward. "What about the kids? If something happens to us?" "Nothing's going to happen to those children," Helen said firmly. "That's what we're fighting for." The first attack came without warning. The hegemony ships opened fire on the surface colony, their energy weapons turning the wooden buildings into ash and melting the stone structures into glass. The Liberty Bell responded immediately, Jake, ordering full power to weapons as they engaged the nearest enemy destroyer. "Direct hit on their port weapons array," reported Ryan Kelly as the Liberty Bell's phasers found their target. "But Captain, their shields are still holding at 80%. The alien ship turned toward them, its own weapons charging. Jake gripped his command chair as enemy fire struck their shields, making the whole ship shake. "Return fire, all weapons." The space battle quickly became desperate. The Liberty Bell was fast and well-armed, but she was outnumbered 6-1. Jake used every trick he knew, diving between the alien ships, using their size against them, trying to keep them from focusing their fire. But he knew they couldn't keep this up for long. On the planet's surface, the real fight was just beginning. Hegemony soldiers, strange reptilian creatures in powered armor, began landing near the ruins of the surface colony. They moved and organized. Groups scanning for human life signs with advanced equipment. What they found instead were Helen Carter and her volunteers, striking from hidden positions and disappearing back into the tunnel system before the aliens could respond. The colonists had spent decades learning every cave and passage in the area, and they used that knowledge now. Team 2, they're moving toward Tunnel Entrance Alpha. Helen spoke into her radio as she watched the alien soldiers from a concealed position. Take them from the side, then fall back to position Beta. The hit-and-run attacks confused the hegemony forces. They were used to fighting conventional battles against organized armies, not guerrilla warfare against people who knew the terrain better than anyone. Every time they thought they had found the humans, their targets would vanish into passages too small for their powered armor. But the aliens adapted quickly. They began using explosives to collapse tunnel entrances, trying to trap the defenders underground. Worse, they brought in scanning equipment that could detect human life signs even through rock and earth. Captain Carter, came a voice over her radio. They're getting close to the main entrance. If they break through there, Helen knew what that meant. The main entrance led directly to the areas where the children were hiding. She made a hard decision. All teams, fall back to the deep tunnels. We're going to make our stand at the main chamber. In space, the Liberty Bell was taking heavy damage. Sparks flew from control panels, and the lights flickered as power systems struggled to maintain shield strength. Jake could feel his ship dying around him, but he refused to give up. Captain, we've lost main engines, reported Carlos Rodriguez from engineering. I'm trying to keep us moving on backup power, but it won't last long. Jake looked at the tactical display. 3 of the hegemony ships were still focused on him, while the other 3 were providing support for the ground troops. His plan was working, at least partially. As long as the aliens were shooting at his ship, they weren't bombing the planet. How long can you give me, Carlos? Maybe 10 minutes on backup power. After that, we'll be dead in space. 10 minutes. Jake touched Leo's bell again, thinking about the little boy who had asked if they would celebrate Christmas on Earth this year. He was running out of options, but he wasn't out of ideas yet. Lisa, can you still reach the colony? Yes, sir, but barely. The interference from the battle is making communication difficult. Get me Helen Carter. A moment later, Helen's voice came through the static. Captain, we're holding them off, but they're closing in on our position. I don't know how much longer we can keep them away from the children. Jake made his decision. Helen, I need you to get everyone as deep underground as possible. I'm going to try something, but it's going to be dangerous for anyone on the surface. What are you planning, Captain? Jake looked at his crew, seeing understanding dawn in their eyes. They knew what he was thinking, and they were with him. I'm going to ram the flagship. If I can take out their command ship, maybe the others will retreat. But I need to know that everyone is safe underground first. There was a long pause before Helen responded. The children wanted me to tell you something, Captain. Young Leo said to remember that Christmas songs are about hope, and hope is the strongest thing humans have. Jake smiled grimly. Tell him I'll remember that. And Helen, take care of that boy's bell for me. You take care of it yourself, Captain. Come back to us. But Jake knew he wasn't coming back. He was going to make sure that Leo and Karolina and all the other children got their chance to celebrate Christmas on Earth, even if he didn't live to see it. All hands, prepare for ramming speed, he announced over the ship's intercom. It's been an honor serving with all of you. The Liberty Bell, battered and dying, turned toward the massive hegemony flagship and began her final charge. The Liberty Bell screamed through space toward the hegemony flagship, her engines pushing beyond their limits. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the massive alien vessel grow larger on the main screen. Around him, his crew worked. At their stations, with calm determination, each person knowing this was their final mission. 30 seconds to impact, announced Beth Williams from her navigation station. All systems holding steady. The hegemony commander appeared on screen one last time, his insect-like features showing what might have been surprise. Human vessel. Alter course immediately, or you will be destroyed. Jake smiled grimly. We're already destroyed. The question is, are you coming with us? The alien ships began firing everything they had at the Liberty Bell, trying to stop her final charge. Energy beams and missiles struck the ship's failing shields, but Jake's crew kept her on course through sheer willpower and skill. Hull breach. On Deck 7, reported Carlos Rodriguez from Engineering. Structural integrity at 30% and falling. Hold her together just a little longer, Carlos, Jake said quietly, dotting the deepest tunnels beneath the planet's surface. The colonists huddled together in the emergency shelter they had carved from solid rock. The children sat in the center of the group, surrounded by adults who tried to comfort them despite their own fear. Leo clutched Karolina's hand while she held her wooden flute against her chest. Are Captain Jake and his friends going to be okay? Karolina whispered to Peter Collins, who sat beside them. Peter didn't know how to answer. Above them, the sound of explosions echoed through the rock as the hegemony soldiers used heavier weapons to try to break through the tunnel defenses. But Peter forced himself to smile for the little girl. Captain Jake is very brave, he said. He's going to do everything he can to keep us safe. Outside, Helen Carter and her remaining defenders had fallen back to their final positions. They had fought a running battle through the tunnel system for hours, using every trick they knew to slow down the alien advance. But now they were trapped. In the main chamber, with the hegemony soldiers closing in from 3 directions. Last magazine, whispered Tom Bradley, one of the younger colonists, as he checked his weapon. After this, we're down to throwing rocks. Helen peered around the stone barrier they were using for cover. The aliens had brought in cutting tools and were burning through the blast doors that protected the deeper tunnels. Once those doors fell, there will be nothing between the soldiers and the children. Remember what we're fighting for, she told her team. Every minute we hold them here is another minute for our kids to stay safe. The hegemony soldiers broke through the first blast door with a shower of sparks and molten metal. Helen and her defenders opened fire, their weapons bright in the underground darkness. The aliens responded with their own guns, energy beams that turned rock to dust and filled the air with choking smoke. But the colonists had one advantage the aliens hadn't expected. Tom Bradley, who had been a mining engineer before the crash, had spent weeks rigging explosives throughout the tunnel system. At Helen's signal, he pressed a small detonator. The explosion brought down half the ceiling, crushing several alien soldiers and blocking one of the main passages. The surviving hegemony forces fell back, regrouping for another assault. That bought us maybe 10 minutes, Tom said. Coughing in the dust-filled air, high above them, the Liberty Bell struck the hegemony flagship with the force of a meteor. Jake's ship punched through the alien vessel's shields and armor, her momentum carrying her deep into the enemy's hull before both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire star system. The destruction of their flagship sent shock waves through the remaining hegemony ships. Their formation broke apart as the surviving vessels tried to figure out what had happened to their command structure. For a few precious minutes, the aliens stopped their coordinated attack and focus on rescuing survivors from their destroyed mothership. But Jake's sacrifice had done more than just eliminate one enemy vessel. The explosion had damaged 2 of the other hegemony ships, leaving them vulnerable. More importantly, it had bought time for an unexpected ally to arrive. The first sign of hope came as a faint signal on the colony's damaged communication system. Lisa Grant's voice, weak but clear, crackled through the static. New Haven Colony, this is Commander Grant of the rescue ship Fortune. We received your distress signal and are en route with a full battle group. Hold your position. Help is coming. Peter Collins stared at the radio in amazement. But how? Captain Morrison never had time to send for help. The answer came from Dr. Foster's voice over the same channel. The Liberty Bell's computer sent an automatic distress signal when we engaged the enemy. It took 3 days for the message to reach Starfleet Command, but they sent everything they could spare. The Relief fleet that dropped out of warp was smaller than the original hegemony force, but it was fresh and ready for battle. 5 human ships spread out in attack formation, their weapons already charging as they moved to engage the confused alien vessel's dock commander. Grant's voice filled the airwaves as she took command of the situation. All hegemony ships, this is the Starfleet vessel Fortune. You are ordered to withdraw immediately from human space. Any vessel that does not comply will be destroyed. The battle that followed was swift and decisive. The hegemony ships, already damaged and demoralized by the loss of their flagship, found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by the human reinforcements. 2 alien vessels tried to flee and were allowed to escape. The others were either destroyed or forced to surrender. On the planet's surface, the remaining hegemony soldiers received orders to withdraw. They fell back to their landing craft, leaving behind their dead and most of their equipment in their haste to escape. Helen Carter and her defenders emerged from their underground fortress to find the surface covered with snow that had turned black from the smoke of battle. The wooden buildings of their colony were gone, reduced to ash and rubble, but the stone foundations remained. They could rebuild. Is it over? Asked Tom Bradley, looking up at the sky where the lights were human. Ships moved among the stars. For now, Helen replied, but we showed them something today. We showed them that humans don't give up, even when the odds are impossible. In the deep shelter, the children heard the all-clear signal and began to emerge from their hiding place. Leo was the first to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. Where's Captain Jake? Peter Collins knelt down beside the boy, choosing his words carefully. Captain Jake had to go away, son. But he made sure we were all safe first. He kept his promise to you. Leo looked around at the adults, his young mind trying to understand what had happened. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of metal, twisted and bent from the explosions above. This fell from the ceiling, he said quietly. It looks like part of a spaceship. Peter examined the fragment and felt his heart sink. It was indeed a piece of hull plating bearing the faint outline of letters that spelled Liberty Bell. Dr. Foster, who had survived the battle in an escape pod, gathered the children around her. Captain Jake wanted me to tell you something, she said softly. He said that Christmas songs are about hope, and that as long as we remember to hope, we can get through anything. Karolina raised her wooden flute. Should we play our song for him? I think he would like that very much. The children formed their small group, just as they had practiced for weeks. Leo took his position, even though his precious bell was gone, keeping time by clapping his hands. Karolina played the melody on her flute while the other children sang. Jingle. Bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. The song echoed through the underground chambers, carrying with it all the hope and determination that had kept these people alive for 50 years. Above them, the human rescue ships continued their work, preparing to take the colonists home to Earth. But as they sang, many of the adults realized that this cold, distant world had become their home in ways they hadn't expected. They had built something here, something worth fighting for. The question now was whether they wanted to leave it all behind. The music played on, a simple children's song that had traveled across the galaxy and brought salvation to those who needed it most. 3 weeks after the battle, the planet looked very different. Human ships filled the sky, bringing supplies, medical teams, and engineers to help rebuild what had been destroyed. The surface colony was being constructed again, this time with better materials and stronger defenses. But the most important changes were happening underground. The tunnel system that had saved the colonists during the battle was being expanded into something amazing. Engineers from Earth worked alongside the colonists to create a permanent base that could house thousands of people. They called it Harmony Station, named after the valley where the original colony had been built. Commander Grant stood in the main chamber, watching as workers installed new communication equipment. She had been put in charge of the rescue operation, but it had quickly become something much bigger. Word of the colonists' 50-year survival and their brave defense had spread throughout human space, inspiring people everywhere. The first group of new settlers arrives tomorrow, she told Peter Collins as they reviewed the construction plans. 500 volunteers who want to help build something permanent here. Peter nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. It's wonderful, Commander, but I worry we're losing something important. This place has been our home for so long. Now it feels like it's becoming someone else's. The question of what to do in New Haven had been debated for weeks. Starfleet wanted to turn it into a major military base to protect human shipping in this sector. Scientists wanted to study the planet's unique ecosystem. Politicians talked about making it a symbol of human determination and courage. But for the 87 original colonists, the decision was much more personal. Some wanted to return to Earth after 50 years of exile. Others had put down roots, too deep to abandon. The children, especially, were torn between curiosity about the homeworld they had never seen and love for the only home they had ever known. Leo Martinez stood in the rebuilt workshop, holding the new bell that the engineers had made for him. It was perfectly crafted from the finest materials, with a clear, bright tone that carried much farther than his old one. But somehow, it didn't feel the same. It's very pretty, said his sister Karolina, who was tuning her own new flute. But I miss your old bell. Me too, Leo admitted. That one had stories in it. Dr. Foster found them there an hour later, practicing their music for the memorial ceremony that would be held that evening. She had been working with the colonist children, helping them deal with the trauma of the battle and the changes happening around them. How are you two doing? She asked, sitting down beside them. We're okay, Karolina said. But we don't know if we want to go to Earth or stay here. Mama says we can choose when we're older, but that seems like a long time to wait. Leo looked up at Dr. Foster with serious eyes. Do you think Captain Jake would want us to go to Earth? Dr. Foster considered the question carefully. I think Captain Jake will want you to be happy and safe, wherever that might be. He fought so hard to give you choices. The important thing is that you get to choose. That evening, the entire colony gathered in the main underground chamber for the memorial ceremony. A new plaque had been installed on the wall, listing the names of everyone who had died defending New Haven. Captain Jake Morrison's name was at the top, followed by the crew members who had died with him on the Liberty Bell. Helen Carter stood before the gathered crowd, wearing her old military uniform that she had kept carefully stored for 50 years. She had been asked to speak about the battle and what it meant for the future of the colony. 50 years ago, we crashed on this planet as refugees, she began. We had lost our ship, our technology, and many of our friends. But we didn't lose. The most important thing, we didn't lose each other. She paused, looking around at the faces in the crowd. There were the original colonists, weathered by decades of hard work and survival. There were the rescue crews who had stayed to help rebuild. And there were the new volunteers, young people who had come from across human space to be part of something special. Captain Morrison and his crew gave their lives to protect this place, Helen continued. But they weren't protecting buildings or equipment. They were protecting an idea. The idea that humans take care of each other, no matter how far from home we might be. When she finished speaking, young Leo and Karolina walked to the front of the chamber. They had asked to perform Jingle Bells one more time, not just for their own people, but for everyone who had come to help them. Leo rang his new bell, its clear tone filling the underground space. Karolina played her flute, the melody sweet and pure. The other children joined in, their voices blending together as they sang the simple song that had started it all. But this time, something different happened. The adults began to sing along, not just the colonists, but the rescue crews and the new settlers too. The song grew and spread until everyone in the chamber was singing, their voices echoing off the stone walls. Commander Grant felt tears in her eyes as she listened to the music. She had come here expecting to evacuate a group of stranded survivors. Instead, she had found something that might be the future of human expansion among the stars. A place where people could build a new kind of community, one that honored both their Earth heritage and their new home. When the song ended, Peter Collins stepped forward with an announcement that surprised everyone. "We've made our decision about the future of New Haven," he said. "We're going to stay. This is our home now, and we want to share it with anyone who believes in what we're trying to build here." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Some of the original colonists had chosen to return to Earth, and transport was being arranged for them. But most had decided that their roots were too deep to transplant. They would stay and help turn Harmony Station into something that had never existed before, a true partnership between Earth and her distant children. Over the following months, the story of New Haven spread throughout human space. The tale of Leo and Karolina's Christmas song bringing rescue to their isolated colony became a legend that inspired millions. More importantly, it became a symbol of human resilience and the power of hope. The hegemony, stung by their defeat, avoided human space for years afterward. They had learned that humans were more dangerous than they appeared, especially when defending their families and their homes. Leo and Karolina grew up to become teachers at Harmony Station, helping new arrivals learn about life on their adopted world. They never stopped playing music together, and every winter they would perform Jingle Bells at the annual memorial ceremony. The song became the unofficial anthem of Harmony Station, played at every important ceremony and celebration. But its real power wasn't in the melody or the words. It was in the reminder of what humans could accomplish when they refused to give up hope. Years later, when historians wrote about the early days of human expansion into the galaxy, they would point to the Battle of Harmony Valley as a turning point. It was the moment when humanity proved it could not only survive in the hostile depths of space, but could create something beautiful and lasting. And at the heart of that story would always be two children, playing a simple Christmas song in the darkness, their music carrying a message across the void. We are here. We are human, and we are not afraid. The jingle of Leo's bell had become the sound of human courage, echoing among the stars forever.